It's Reuben here with another sketching video.
Hey guys, well today I'm going to show you a little video of a bee orchid. A bee orchid is a beautiful flower that grows wild in Ireland, in the Burren, particularly in the west of Ireland. When my kids were very small, I used to take them for walks into the Burren and to give them something to do, and also to give them a focus, but also to help them discover the beauty and the majesty and the magic of the Burren for themselves. I used to send them on a little orchid hunt, and like if I just said, okay, go and find an orchid, they would have been less than compliant. So I would say to them, okay, look, there's 6 species of orchids here in the Burren today. There are 5 regular ones, and the regular ones, I mean, they're obviously very beautiful and special, but they are quite common and easy to find. But there was one very special one, the bee orchid, that I myself had never seen. And I was pretty confident the kids wouldn't find one. So I used to offer them a cash reward for finding orchids. They would get a £5 if they found all 5 species and no fewer than the 5 regular easily found orchids. And they would get a tenner if they found a bee orchid. And I would send them on their way, and off they'd go happily into the hills and spend the next hour hunting orchids and discovering how beautiful the countryside was for themselves. And the years passed, my kids grew, and then about 2 years ago, my youngest Livy ran into the kitchen and she said, Mum, there's a bee orchid in the garden. And I was like, what? So we went out into the back garden, the grass you can see behind me, and we found, indeed, a grove of bee orchids, and we were absolutely ecstatic. And by that time, the cash reward had gone up to €20, so I had to pay up. And since that time, I've sketched the bee orchids a few times. So here's one I did last week. And it's supposed to trick a bee into thinking that it's a lady bee or something, I don't know. And anyway, that's how it works. But it's quite incredible. It does look like a bee. It's an amazing flower. So anyway, I thought you might like to see my approach to drawing a bunch of wildflowers. Basically, the approach is you just start at the top and you keep going until you get to the bottom. And it's a kind of a way to trap the summer in your sketchbook, I suppose. But anyway, have a look and see how I got on. I did one separately for you. So I don't know if it'll be easy to follow along, but I hope you enjoy it, and maybe even give it a try.
Here's the little bee orchid that I chose to do, and I started off by drawing the flower from top to bottom. I used my brown ink in the Food Aid fountain pen. Reuben is clearly finding the warm afternoon a little bit tiring. But it's such a pretty little flower with its purple petals. Here is a pale pink one that is also an orchid, but of a different species. And I added the flowers one by one so that I ended up with this cute little spread. And I don't know, you might notice that big bug on the top left. That's a cockchafer that I came across recently. Okay, so this is the orchid that I drew especially for you. Hopefully you'll be able to follow along. You can see that the flower has got these little roundy unopened buds at the top that I'm drawing. And I'm using the medium width line. So that's the vertical position of the nib. And you know by now that a Food Aid pen is bent at a 55-degree nib, which gives it the versatility to have all sorts of lines, from a wide one if you hold the pen at a low angle to a very, very skinny, narrow line if you whip the pen around and use the backside of the pen to draw. And I'm using that very narrow line on the reverse of the nib, as you can see there, to do the inner bits, the little internal shapes in the flower. Now, I've cut out the shots that had my hand covering the flower as much as possible, so there's a bit of jumping around, and I hope it can give you enough time to draw the flower as you go. And hopefully, I don't know, you can pause it or something. Now, this is the bit where there was a beautiful flowering grass on top of the orchid in the frame of the camera, and I didn't notice it. So it's very frustrating. It's covering up the bit I was trying to show you. I'm going down the flower, working my way along, using the lovely expressive line of the Fude pen to get those lines. You can use a dip pen as well, which is absolutely fabulous, but the Fude pen is a bit more convenient because you don't have to keep dipping it into an ink reservoir all the time. You've got the ink of your choice in the inside the barrel of the pen in the converter. So keeping my lines skinny for the delicate bits, slowing it down a little bit here so you can catch up with the line drawing a little bit. If I make any mistakes, which I do frequently, even a flower like this, which is quite simple in its shapes, you can easily make a mistake, and you can see there's a mistake with the leaf. I just draw on top of it because I know that I'll be able to paint on top and you won't notice any of those lines. Now, I made the mistake, I suppose, of drawing in portrait, which means that it's kind of hard to see the full flower at a close remove. Now, I'm using magenta. It's quinacridone magenta mixed with phthalo blue or phthalo blue, and I'm mixing little bits of hot pink and blue together to get the purpley colour of the orchid. Now, I'm not sure I got it 100% right. I could have gone back into my studio and found a more appropriate colour, but I'm nothing if not a little bit on the lazy side, so I didn't do that. And I figured it was okay. It was good enough. Now, I'm using a squirrel mop brush here from Rosemary & Co. I have an affiliate with Rosemary & Co. So if you put in the code ROISIN, ROISIN 2024 when you're buying a brush, then I get points. I think you get points as well. And eventually I'll be able to spend it on brushes and that kind of thing, which would be really, really fun. But although I love this brush and it's a brilliant brush for water retention and therefore colour retention, because it holds loads of colour in the solution of paint, it doesn't have the pointiest of tips. Well, it is pointy, but it isn't a very firm tip. You get that with your natural hair brushes. So I did think after a while, maybe I should have used the R13, which is my sort of regular go-to brush from Rosemary & Co. It's a combination of sable and synthetic, and it's very versatile. But again, I was a bit lazy, and even though the brush was right there, I didn't swap over my brushes. I'm adding a little bit of burnt umber for the fat bit of those little petals, the bit that is supposed to look like a bee. It's quite a concentrated mix of burnt umber, and as you can see, my squirrel mop brush went a slight bit out of the line of the edge of the flower on that top one, which wouldn't have happened if I'd been using my R13. So I'm being very careful painting in these little burnt umbery bits, and I'm making sure I don't bump into the wet pink on the petals by accident, because if I do, I'll get a colour run and then I'll lose all my bright colours, which would be a terrible shame. So I've got a little bit of burnt sienna added into the mix for the inner bits. Now I'm adding some yellow green for the stems, which is a mix of Aquarius yellow and sap green in different proportions according to which part of the stem or which leaf I'm looking at. Some of them are a bit more yellow and some of them are a little bit darker depending on which part of the plant it is. You can see I'm covering up the mistake on that little bit there. Now I went a bit close to the pink bit there. As you can see, it ran into the pink on the petal and it muddied up my green and it muddied up the pink. So I went at it a few times with my brush, with a clean brush, to try and mop off the mistake. But, you know, it's hard to be patient when you just are in the flow of things. And it's great if it's a sunny day and your paint is drying a bit more quickly. But it's not always quite fast enough. Just running a line of slightly darker green down the outside of the stems. Now I'm just speeding up the last little bit because there's not a lot more to glean from it, except to say that I'm deepening up some of the colours really. By this stage, the first layers are all dry, and as you can see, I've swapped over to my R13. I've learnt my lesson and I've thrown laziness aside, which is where it belongs. And I'm just cleaning up that little edge there on the plump bit of the petal. And as you can see, I'm deepening up some of the colours and it just makes everything stand out a little bit more. So the order is put on your colours, wait for them to dry, Do not bump into any wet paint in the meantime when you're doing that. And then add another layer of the same colour, a little bit more concentrated, especially on the side away from the light. And as you can see, the overall flower is much enhanced and the colour is made richer and deeper. And then when you've done all that, you just go over all the bits that you may have missed, fill them all in. Look for those little yellow bits in between the little fat petally bits as well. And you'll end up with a beautifully complete bee orchid. So this is more or less what mine looks like. Little bits of yellow added on top. Little bits of green to darken up those sides of the stems away from the light. Just looking out for any richer versions of the same colours that I've been using. This is where it all counts a lot. This is where your values come in, deepening up sections that are in shadow, making more concentrated versions of some of your pink. And you'll always know when it's done because it'll suddenly look very real.
Well, I hope you're inspired to draw some wildflowers of your own. Obviously, you're not allowed to pick orchids in Ireland because they're a protected species. But we do a lot of lying on the ground and drawing them and generally admiring them. Sometimes my husband, Marcel, will throw the ball for Reuben, and I'm always full of warnings not to throw them into the patch with the orchids in it, or the bee orchids, because Reuben chases, don't you Reuben, chases after his ball with crazy abandon, even though he doesn't look like he chases anything with abandon right now. And we have had one casualty. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but then Reuben might have to be arrested and that would be very bad. So there you go, painting it might be the best way to preserve it forever. And of course it's a wonderful thing to do on a warm summer's day. So goodbye from Reuben and goodbye from me, and we look forward to sketching with you next time.